Welcome to the Live Alive podcast.
Welcome to Live Alive. We're back. This is our 17,000th show, and we're excited that you're here. We have a lot to talk about today. We have our replacement for Dylan again. Mm-hmm. Introduce yourself.
I'm Mia.
Mia's in the house.
Yep.
Anyway.
So last time Mia was here, she gave us a challenge. So we're going to revisit that challenge later on in the episode.
Nice.
But first, lava in Hawaii. From what I hear, if a golf ball sized piece of lava actually hits you, it could go through you because it's so dense.
What?
Okay, I didn't say it can go through you.
I heard it can float on its own.
I said I read somewhere, and it's a problem in 2018. If you don't remember what source you read it from, there's a lot of questions. But I read somewhere that a piece of lava splattered and hit some guy in his ankle, burned his ankle, and shattered his ankle. Just a small little piece, because it's such dense rock. I could be totally off right now. I didn't do my research on this.
I mean, it's not beyond, the realm of truth. When I was a kid, I remember learning about the sun. And that the sun is, in fact, so dense that if you were to take a teaspoon of the sun, the matter of the sun, it would weigh as much as 13 elephants.
Oh my gosh.
That's how heavy the sun is.
Wow.
So it's possible that this is true about lava, but we should all...
Well, the thing is, I believe everybody because we're all scientists. And so I trust all of your facts.
Well, one of the funniest things that I do with cashiers at grocery stores, especially when I have my kids with me and I'm going through the line, is, you know how you get up and on one side it's like gum and candy and stuff like that, and the other side is news and, supposedly like magazines. So I like to walk up to cashiers and just kind of smile at them like, hey, with the kids. And my kids, everything that you see on this rack of magazines is true. And I want you to take it seriously. But how do we know what's true anymore? It's very difficult.
Yeah, my granddad back in the 90s, he actually used to pick up a lot of those magazines. He was a very fun, charismatic person, and he would just read those things, and my parents would be like, "Dad, that's not real." It's like, "Oh, really?" He thought it was real. So people actually think those magazines are real.
Kind of my barometer, if someone takes the time to type it online, I trust it. So... That's how I live my life.
Photograph.
I only do that if it's about volcanoes. I believe anything anyone writes about volcanoes.
That's fair.
Man. Well, so coming back from Memphis, I think one of the things that we've been doing as we pursue the abundant life, that's what this season is all about, is we were challenging ourselves to live out the abundant life in ways that maybe we're not right now. And part of that has just been connecting with people that are different from us and who have a story that's very different from our story. And finding what the abundant life is like from their perspective. And I know that I was super challenged by what Micah was talking about last week.
Well, it's interesting, Mia being back on the show, the last time you were here, you set forth an awesome challenge for all of us, if you'd like to rehash what that was.
Yes. So we talked about, as Christians, most people, but especially Christians, we get into this bubble of people that look like us, dress like us, talk like us, have the same opinions as us. We don't do it on purpose, but it happens easily, and then we get kind of stuck in a comfort bubble. So the challenge was, and when I thought of the challenge, I wasn't thinking that I would be involved again and be back. It was really for a challenge for you all.
You were not getting out of this one.
But for us, or for you guys, to go and get lunch or coffee with someone who is different and not in your normal bubble. And so, Jeremy, I think it was your idea to find the person sitting next to us or to the left and choose that person. And so I chose your person.
I kind of chose Chris's person.
But it never worked out.
It never worked out. Well, speaking of
there's
that...
a story behind that. We can talk more about that.
Let's talk about it. You
All
can
right.
go first.
I'm going first?
Yep.
Oh, man.
Put you on the spot.
Well, I don't think I've told you guys the whole story, but
Well, let me prep because I tried to choose your person.
Yeah.
And then you can take it from there. So I tried to find someone for Chris, and I was going through my head, who would be good for Chris? And I was thinking, right down the road, there's a seminary called RTS, Reformed Theological Seminary. And as you can tell by the name, there's a lot of Reformed people in there. And if you know Reformed people, there's a further right on the Reformed side, which is hyper Reformed people.
Pretty crazy culture.
Yeah, which casual Friday means taking off your bow tie. But they still have the blue blazer on. And so I wanted to find that person.
No offense.
No offense. Well, I mean, it's just the truth. So, like, I love them. I love my Reformed people, and I would say I'm kind of Reformed. But that doesn't matter. What matters is I tried to find someone from that school, and I had trouble, and then I actually got in touch with the academic dean of the whole school, who said he wanted to do it, but they're in graduation right now. And so he said, can we do it July 1st? And I hung up on him. But no, I didn't. It was on email. But I
You've
thought...
been known to hang up on people, including your mom in earlier episodes.
But I thought, man, I've blown this. So I was talking to Chris, like, to yesterday. I mean, we had 2 weeks. To yesterday, you still don't have anybody. And so you can take it from here.
Well, I'll be honest. Out of laziness, I was waiting for you to get me the person.
Right.
That never happened. Never worked out. So then I started going through Facebook, about finding people who I disagree with on a lot of different things. And one person in particular really caught my interest. So I sent him a text message yesterday and just let him know, look, I really want to have this 15-minute conversation with you. I'm not going to say who I talked to on air or what your name is or what your job is, but I'd love to have this conversation with you. He never got back to me. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's a busy guy. Maybe he never saw it. Well, this morning, I was in my house. Well, first off, my house almost burned down this morning. That was epic.
I heard that.
Yeah. So I put a piece of toast in the toaster and then left. I forgot about it. Toasters are supposed to pop up. This piece of toast never popped up. I came back in the house. There was like lava in my toaster and smoke everywhere. It was nuts. It was like a movie. When you walk in, the alarms are going off, smoke pouring out the door. That's besides the point. A little later, this man comes to my door. I could see him. I was standing across the house. I could see out the window towards the door. And there is probably a middle-aged white dude standing outside my door in a full winter jacket.
In Florida.
Yes. It's May, late May in Florida. It's 80 degrees outside. There's a man standing outside my front door in a full winter jacket with his hands in his pocket. So I'm thinking, I'm not opening that door. I don't want to get in a gunfight right now. You know what I mean? So I just ignored him, pretended he wasn't there. Well, a few minutes later, I left the house and I saw him knocking on other people's doors. So I thought to myself, self, that's weird. Self, that's weird. I come back and, I left and I thought to myself, wait, that's the kind of guy I should talk to. Just a weirdo knocking on people's doors in a full winter jacket with his hands in his pockets.
Sure.
Normal stuff, right?
Yeah, normal Tuesday.
Why not talk to that guy? Well, he was gone when I came back. I couldn't find him anywhere. And then I came to my door and there was a Republican pamphlet left on my door. He must have come back and taped something to my door. And so it just got me thinking about the fact that I really want to do a better job of engaging people who creep me out. And Bob Goff talks a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And I'm not very good at it because sometimes there's other things going on in my life. And the last thing I want to do is talk to a man in a full winter jacket in the middle of summer outside my door. So even though I didn't get to have this conversation, things just didn't work out, it taught me that I want to be better at... Obviously, there's not always going to be this extreme of a creeper standing outside my front door, possibly with a gun. But I think I don't do a good job of that in general. I like to stay comfortable.
Sure.
I'm an introvert, and so I have my people, I have my job and my sphere of influence, but I usually don't venture out of that environment unless I'm at the supermarket or something. But even then, I want to do a better job of engaging with people around me, people that are different than me, whether they be, like a frat guy or a super nerd or even gamers. Yeah, I don't really connect well with gamers. I've thought about that recently. I live with one. He's a pretty awesome dude.
You have to connect in the game with the gamer.
Yeah, I've heard. People always tell me, why don't we make you a character and go for it? I'm like, I'm not really interested. But maybe I need to engage with that kind of stuff with people, enter their world.
Well, I think where you're at is it's actually really helpful because you can't engage everybody. There's so many niches and groups of people that it's impossible to talk to everybody. But man, that kind of the winter parka at the front door guy, I don't know. That's where we're different. I'm out extrovert. I'm like, oh yes, here we go. open the door. Where'd you get your parka? You know, but that is cool to come to that realization, because comfort is, I mean, even all of us would say that. Anybody would say that. Comfort is easier and seems better.
Yeah.
I think that as we are trying to live like Jesus, the story that comes to mind is the one of Zacchaeus. Because when we say creepers, those are, you know, they're words that we use in jest or in conversation, and we laugh about it. But there really are people out there that are more or less ignored or ostracized, or there's entire categories of people that are kind of left out of our lives.
Yeah.
You know, just because of the rhythm or because of our personal taste and preference. And I think Jesus modeled for us what it's like to go against the grain. To actually, and not for the sake of going against the grain, but to actually show what love is. Because a lot of times my life is not filled with love for people who are different than me. And it's very challenging to look at that and to say, man, Jesus actually approached and was very intentional to reach out to Zacchaeus, who was a tax collector. And in those days, a tax collector was a robber. They were seen as someone who was stealing from you, and they were not well liked and rejected by most people. And so here's Zacchaeus up in a tree trying to see Jesus coming down the road, and Jesus stops and actually intentionally goes for this person and to build a relationship and says, hey, I'm coming to your house today for lunch. And then another cultural faux pas was to actually enter the home of someone who was hated. It was like going into a sacred space with that person, much less having a conversation in public. It was like, what is he doing? You know? And he just did things, Jesus did things that were unconventional, that were against the public, popular idea of what was right. And he succeeded in actually building relationships. And he actually succeeded in seeing Zacchaeus' life changed. And then other people's lives changed because Zacchaeus' life changed. And that's the kind of thing we're looking for. It's like, what does it look like for us to change our rhythm, to be more like Jesus, so we can see life change, not only our own life, but others as well. You know.
Yeah. Let's go to our other introverted person at the table and hear about your experience, which I think Pez set up. Is that right?
Yes, Pez set it up.
Better late than never, right?
It was perfect lead time in the sense I did it just last night, and it was due today. And I wasn't expecting for the schedule to work out, but she's actually pretty extroverted. So we were texting back and forth, and I felt terrible. I was like, this girl has a job and a life, and I'm asking her to meet with a stranger the day before it's due. But she was all about it. In fact, so we met at a bar that was close to both of us. And when I got there, she was already meeting with another stranger, a potential roommate. So I was like trading out.
Wow.
So she was totally fine and awesome. And the more we got to talk, we saw that we had a lot of similarities. We live in the same neighborhood, which is totally a coincidence. We're both Christians. We're both involved in our churches. I think the biggest thing for me, though, was to realize we live in the same neighborhood, literally streets apart. We're both Christians, the same age, but I don't think I would have ever met her unless I got out of my comfort zone and was willing to meet with a stranger, which I don't think a lot of us ever do. I'll be honest, when I got her name, the first thing I did was I searched her on Instagram because I wanted to just know her face, what she looked like, what kind of clothes does she wear, and I couldn't find her.
Classic
I found her
Insta-stalker.
Insta-stalked. So walking into the bar, I had no idea what she looked like. And so the first thing I'm doing is I'm trying to scan all of the girls who are there alone. I didn't know she was meeting with a friend. Couldn't find her, felt so uncomfortable, actually saw a friend there, and so I was almost even embarrassed to be seen. She didn't ask me what I was doing, but I was like, after we talk, I'm going to have to, like, awkwardly look around. Am I going to ask people, like, are you Kaylee? I have a friend, I won't say his name because I think he listens to the podcast, but he is on Tinder a lot. And so I was texting, I was like, is this what Tinder feels like? Like, you have no idea which person is your date. And he's like, that's exactly what Tinder.
Like friend Tinder.
Yes, he's like, that's exactly what it was like. So he's giving me hints. He's like, you can look for her. I was like, I have no idea what she looks like. So I just waited around. She wasn't checking her phone because she was meeting with someone else. And finally, we connected. And it was a great conversation. She was super extroverted, so she was, like, ready to jump in, which is different for me. But introverts do pretty well one-on-one quality time. So we had great conversation. Our stories were different, but it was just refreshing to share your life randomly with a stranger. And there wasn't any there wasn't like, I don't know, we didn't really have a goal. We were like, let's just sit down and share what we've been going through. And we kind of both have gone through some intense things these last 2 years. And so that was just kind of a cool connection point to talk about how our stories are different but the same in a lot of ways. She is a new believer, which was really interesting to me because sometimes I just feel hopeless about adults meeting Jesus. And I shared that I didn't grow up in a Christian home, but I met him through youth group. And so I was just really interested where I was like, okay, you were 24, so you met him around 23, 22. And I just wanted to know how, because I, in my own life, can feel really helpless for the adults in my life who I've wanted to know the abundant life, but don't. And so it was cool just to hear her story. Yeah, she was awesome. She worked for Facebook for a while and then Relevant, and now she's working somewhere else. But yeah, it was just really cool to be like, we literally live streets apart and I've never seen you before. And we even enjoy the same things and I've never seen you before. And even if I have, I probably just looked past you and you probably looked past me.
Yeah.
So it was cool to just be like, wow, there's like really cool people close to me that I'm missing out on because I'm so like in my bubble.
Yeah.
You guys are trying to find somebody that's opposite of me, but I'm an ENFP personality, so it's like I can get along with a wall. It doesn't even matter.
That's true.
So in this case,
Yeah, I walked in the other day. You were talking to the wall. It was weird.
I've been painting a lot of walls for our new studio. But, so I thought a lot about it, and there's a few people that I met several years ago. We're talking 2003, and to give you an idea, Facebook came out in like 2003, 2004. So this is really pre-Facebook, where you had to actually have relationships with people, and to meet them, you had to physically meet them or call them on the telephone. And
What's a telephone?
it's a device that you can, well, you can teleport with it.
Oh.
No. So we used to hang out at this coffee house, and there was a group of folks there that would hang out that are just really, really different. Not engaged in any sort of religious activities. In fact, very anti-religion. And so Mariah and I, my wife, we would spend a lot of time there and just talk, play games, hang out, build relationships, spend time not just at the coffee house, but also at our house and invite them over, and then they would reciprocate that a lot of times. And so this is a guy that I had met back then, but we haven't spoken since then, since he had graduated from college at UCF. And it was our kind of friendships. We stopped hanging out before Facebook really came out, and we've never connected before. So last night I was sitting around just going, I should try to talk to him again. And I wonder if he's on Facebook. So I looked him up, and this is what Facebook's actually really cool for, is finding somebody from the past that you hadn't connected with in a long time. And it's not cool for anything else except that. But so I did, and within seconds he accepted my friend request, and then I just started a conversation with him, and we started going back and forth. And it brought back a lot of memories from how our conversations used to be, because he's just the kind of person that when you ask him a question, he gives you like a one-word answer and doesn't ask you a question back. So it's just a challenge for me to go there, and it wears me out, because a conversation it stops being interesting when you're the one who's just constantly like pushing out there. And I've had a few people in my life like that, and usually the relationship doesn't last very long. But I just was thinking about how much God loves this person, and even 15 years later, could bring someone like me back into his life to start talking about things. We didn't have a chance to talk about anything spiritual, and I was just asking him, like, so what are you reading? What are you watching? Do you listen to any podcasts? Like, I just kind of asked him, I said, hey, I always like to ask people, what are you learning right now? Because I like to learn. And it just gets him talking. So it was an exercise in like trying to not force a conversation, but really take initiative to try to draw him out.
Yeah.
And who knows? We may get to continue talking now, because I'm going to go get this book that he was talking about last night that he said is really interesting. It's written by the same guys that wrote, what's that movie about the banks that just went really big? Like the
Banks.
The banks.
Like Mr. Banks?
No. No. Oh, never mind. But it's basically...
Enron?
No. that's gas and oil, right?
Yeah.
I think so. Anyway, but I'm going to try to go get this book, and it's a way for me to now try to take the conversation to the next level, to kind of see if we can keep talking.
Yeah.
And I found out he's moved. He's far away from here. He's up in Illinois somewhere now, but we can continue to talk. And we're very, very different. It's very hard to talk with him about spiritual stuff because he's not into it. So, but yeah, that's what I learned.
Interesting. What's crazy is like, so Chris is more like learning about missed opportunities. Mia's more like, hey, we as Christians miss each other all the time, and we're out there. Why aren't we uniting and connecting and edifying, encouraging? Yours is more of a old relationship. How do you rehash it if it's been kind of silent for a long time, right?
15 years.
And I think what's crazy is this all started because Perkins said, like, why don't Christians actually unify together? And why don't we talk to people who are different than us? Micah said similar stuff as well. But it's just, there's so many different aspects to it. There's so many different ways we can do this. So there's not like just one way to do anything. It's just kind of taking a look around and what's around you. And for you, it's like an old relationship. You is someone at your door, probably a fireman or, whatever. And I don't know. I think it's just interesting just hearing all y'all's perspective, thinking like, there's so many people that are right around me that are brothers and sisters in Christ that I don't know. And it's because of me. I don't actually want to know. People I've kind of lost relationship with. And if God brings back my life, how do I do that? And how do I engage with just whatever's right in front of me?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really interested to hear this story.
Okay. Mia set mine up, so you can go ahead and
Explain
preface.
a little about him. So in college, I took a few. This is the professor. Are we saying his name?
Sure.
Yeah.
Professor Nagy. So I was in a unique situation where I got 2 years of college done in high school. So in college, I had a choice. I could either attack my major and be done in 2 years and be out, or I had 2 years free of electives. And that's what I chose because I was like, college is fun. And so even though I'm an elementary major, and that's what I graduated with, I was able to take 2 years of any classes that I wanted. And so psychology was one of my favorite things to go at. And so Nagy is a psychology professor. He had nothing to do with my major, but I took at least maybe 3, but at least 2 of his courses because I thought he was so interesting. But other people's perspectives, especially if you are involved with any religion, especially Christian, is that they left hating Nagy. And I know people who have cried in his class. I know people who have dropped it, walked out, taken the F. I think the first day of class he said, please do not have your Christian mommy email me, because every semester he would get emails from parents saying, I'm praying for you. And I think every person, even if they didn't take his course, all of my friends who went to UCF when I was like, I set Jeremy up with Nagy, their jaws dropped because they've heard about him.
Yeah.
They've either felt attacked by him or their friends have, and so they knew about him. Pej, you knew about him when I brought him up to you.
I knew about him. I never took his class. Out of 70,000 students, I still knew about him.
Yes, which is crazy. I continue to take his class because I found it so interesting. I'm a very introverted person. There's no way that he would know my name or my face, but I would always sit front row because I would just love to watch the interactions because people would get mad and they would stand up or shout. He has a way of getting people riled up. So when picking someone for Jeremy, I was racking my brain, and I couldn't think of anyone that would make Jeremy uncomfortable, and I didn't want to pick someone that Jeremy could easily charm. And so I was like, who can I choose for this actually to be a challenge? And I thought of Nagy, and I emailed him, and he was within 24 hours. He was like, sure, time and date, I'll do it.
Yeah. It was very, very interesting. So I never had Nagy, and I don't even remember really much about college, let alone professors. So
Why is that?
I don't know, man. I couldn't tell you one thing I learned in college, but that's just my story. So, I found it interesting that, so I'm set up with a regionally renowned Christian hater professor, that people all across Central Florida kind of know this guy to be a Christian hater in the most, explicit sense. So that actually got me really excited about talking with him. Not because I wanted to go to combat or go to war and think like, oh, this is a debate or something, but I was just actually honestly really intrigued by just who he was and why he was so mad and what he had to say. So, I hit him up and he said, let's meet at Subway. That's where all the professors hang out. And
Is that for real?
No. I think it was just close to his house. But yeah, so he comes in and there was a long line. And he's like, well, I don't want to eat. Let's just talk. I was like, okay. So we sit down and he said he had an hour to talk, which I thought was very generous. Right?
For
He's
sure.
sitting down with a complete stranger for an hour just to talk. He has no idea really what's going on. So he's like, so tell me what this is. And I was kind of explaining that it was a podcast and we've been challenged to talk to people who are different than us. And I said, I've heard that you don't have a religious affiliation and I'm a Christian. So that puts us at odds. And I kind of just want to talk to you and see what it looks like to kind of unify. And as just human beings, where can we actually, agree and live in harmony? And so I think he was intrigued by that. And maybe he's listening. I hope he is. But yeah, the whole time it was just a very peculiar conversation and one that I don't know if I've ever had a conversation like this because within the 7-minute mark, he went on the offensive on his reasons why Christianity is so stupid. It's just so stupid. And so I was intrigued because my perspective is always like, if you know what's true and I don't know what's true, then please tell me because I'm at the baseline a seeker. I want to know what's true, and I'll at least give you an ear to like actually listen if you have something that is true. The oddest thing happened because he's a Fulbright scholar. He's obviously a very bright dude. He's 58, but I just walked out of the whole conversation actually really affirmed in my own faith. And really affirmed that Christianity not only is like real, it's right. It's true. It's eternal. And because I found all of his arguments for how smart he was extremely weak and inconclusive. And the fact that he would base all of it on his arguments, I was like, man, that's a slippery slope. And so we got along great. Like, I thought he was funny. I mean, we couldn't play any 30-minute segment of what he said on this show because there was at least one curse word every 30 seconds, and usually about 5. But it seemed like he was very frantically angry and frustrated with religion, and at the same time, not exactly sure about what's true. So you could understand someone being in that state. They're going to be like,
it's hard
attacking.
Yeah.
They're going because they're just they're mad and they're kind of scared.
Yeah,
That's
you're unsure.
Yeah. And so I asked him a bunch of questions. I'm trying to even think where to start with this topic because he went off on this thing of going on all this stuff. He's like, for me, I'm data and evidence based. That's it. If there's no evidence, like he was like, there's no evidence for a soul. There's no evidence for hell, demons, angels, heaven, a personal God, like all these things, right? But to the contrary, you say, well, okay, is there any evidence opposing it? And he's like, well, you can't use the negative. That's not how that works. And I'm like, well, sorry, I didn't know. That's, whatever. But what was really interesting is for a man who was so evidence and data-based, I questioned. Because I think he actually is very, not only smart, but like wise, like streetwise. Because I was like, okay, when you're in the glass castle of academia, right? And it's like all these ideas swirling around and everyone thinks they're so important. How do you handle that? And he's like, oh, I hate it. It's all BS. The whole thing's BS. And then he was like, listen, this is how this works. And he's explaining to me what academia is. He's like, let's take global warming. Now, what I'm about to say don't represent any of my views. I don't care. But for him, he's like, global warming, these people get their grants to research if it's real or not. Is there global warming? Maybe. Do we have some part in it? I don't know. But if they get money to prove that it's, real or not, if they came back and said it's not, then they get no more money and the grant runs out. But if they come back and say it is, we need more money, well, then they're going to keep getting grants. He's like, and this happens all the time in academia, that like money dictates, what's being said. And I was like, well, for being so data and evidence-based, how do you know the difference between corrupted data and real data? He's like, well, you have to look at the evidence itself. And I'm like, but if they want to like have an outcome to prove a point, you don't know their motives and intentions. So you're taking your best guess on what it is or what it's not. And he's like, well, you can't be too sure, but you just have to try your best. And I was like, Dr. Nagy, like, that's scary. And I wouldn't put any of my trust in that, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, that you're making me a disbeliever in any scientific journal I read. Not because it could be, not that it's not true, but I don't know what's true and what's not true. Mm-hmm. But anytime we get into these conversations where he kind of get, like, on a point where he's stuck, he'd be like, well, let's talk about world history. And then he'd attack at different angles about, different aspects. And I think one of the points that just really came home for me was actually understanding a story. I said, Dr. Nagy, at what point did you become conscious and free thinking? Mm-hmm. He's like, oh, I know exactly the point. This, I can remember like it was yesterday. I grew up in Texas. Everyone, this is his point of view, everyone who is any religion is that religion because their parents are that, their grandparents are that, their aunts and uncles are that, their surrounding community is that, even though that goes totally against what Mia just said. And so they just believe what they're taught. And I was no different. I grew up, my parents were Christian, my grandparents were Christians, everyone I knew were Christians. I went to Bible, camps and all this stuff. And when I got to college, I took a semester at the University of Madrid. And there was a class where the professor was talking about how Muslims invaded Spain from like the 700 to 1500 range to try and take over. And then the Spaniards kind of brushed them out around 1500. And there's this 800-year period. And he was talking about Muhammad and all this stuff. And he said he walked away from it like, what idiot, this is his quote, what idiot would follow Muhammad as a prophet? It makes no sense. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, in his way of talking. And then he said, then I thought, well, why do I think Jesus is a prophet? Because my parents told me so? I don't believe that. And then he said he felt liberated. And he's like, but I believe in God. And he's like, well, why do I believe in God? Because my parents told me that. Well, I don't believe in God. And he said, then he felt liberated. And then he said he went through a 6-month depression because he thought, well, I'm not going to see my parents or grandparents in heaven and all this stuff. But then he's like, after that 6 months, I was free. And I really felt free. And then I think he, got into academia and because he was so data and evidence. But the oddest thing about the whole thing is that he was not happy. He was not content. He was not at peace. He was a frantic man trying to prove his points. Yeah. And I don't think he actually fully believed anything on his own accord. He just disbelieved other people's points. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So there wasn't really anything firm he was standing on. Mm-hmm. All he could do was attack other people's thoughts and beliefs.
Well, I think it's important because maybe not to the same degree as Professor Nagy, because when you're in academia, it's because you've invested maybe a lot of your life pursuing these ideas, and then you have to spend your life teaching these ideas, and you have to be someone who actually knows something. Right? So, but a lot of people are actually scared because we don't know what the truth is, and we don't have something to stand on. And when you don't have something to stand on, you've been through an earthquake. Like when the floor shakes, it's not fun for your ideas. And so the best we can do is get defensive about what we have. You know, it's like when something crazy happens, the first thing you do is like figure out how to survive. And when you're in survival mode and it plays out in a conversation and relationships, it sounds a lot like anger and fear and biting out at people.
I mean, it just seemed like his parents, I don't know him, but it seemed like they probably forced their views on him and his mind. And then when he became free of that, he wanted to find truth. And I don't think he's actually found it yet. So that just makes you extremely cynical, angry, mad, frantic, scared, all the things. Because I asked him, okay, if there's no heaven and there's no God, what is your purpose? What is purpose in being human? Like, what are you living for? And he's like, that's a good question. I think about it most nights when I'm going to bed. And I'm still struggling with that question. but my answer would be to be a good person and to help other people become free thinkers. And I just kept thinking, like, well, do you want other people to have your life?
Yeah.
And that's not like a knock on him as a person. It's
Did you
just,
ask him that?
I don't remember now, but it was something in that realm. Like, we were talking back and forth where I was like, it doesn't seem like you're happy. Mm-hmm. Like, it really doesn't. And I was like, you know, and we got into other conversation, like, what do you think is a good person? And he was like, you know, that's a whole other can of worms. Like, how can you define good or bad, or good or evil, right or wrong, if there's no baseline and everyone can define it for themselves? And there's like collective thinking about it, which has never worked in human history. Yeah. Anyway, but I was like, what makes you a good person? And he said, well, you know, like, it seems like he has twins who are 26-year-old. He seems like he really loves his kids. He says that, you know, he'll go on runs and pick up trash. And even in that, it's like, while that is a great thing, man, it still seems shallow of all the good things we can be doing. And I think there's more for him, and he knows it, and that's what makes him kind of like really
stuck,
frantic. Yeah. But at the end, you know, I'll share a quote. He said, Jeremy, you are excellent at sugarcoating a turd. I said, that's a compliment and a diss at the same time, so I'm going to write that down. So I was glad about that.
And I think, too, one thing that I think is really interesting about Nagy is that he's a great teacher. The things he chooses to show us and make us read in class and the videos, they're all so interesting. So I never skipped his class, and I skipped many classes in college because I wanted to be there, because even if I disagreed with it, he was putting on just like, I don't want to say show, but it was always interesting. It was always captivating. And the crazy thing is, I feel like his one, and you said it too with free thinking, his one goal for no matter what class he was teaching was to get people to think outside of their own bubble, their own culture, which is why I think he did this podcast, because I wrote out to him like a 6-paragraph essay, which you should never do in an email, but I just wanted him to know exactly what we were doing. Like, I didn't hide it. I told him the podcast name. I told him we were Christians. I told him what the challenge is, why we were doing it, which I think is what intrigued him, because it's what he's all about. He wants people to be free thinking, and that's why I loved his class. Being around non-Christians, it doesn't intimidate me because I was raised by non-Christians. All my family are non-Christians, and so I almost felt at home, front row in his class, because I was like, you know, this isn't different for me. But I, like you said, I left the class, like you left the conversation, so much more sure of my faith. And I think that's what we should all do, spend time with people and not be afraid that it's going to change our faith or crush our faith. Because if Jesus is real, it won't.
Yeah, I mean, are you willing to bank it all on that? Like, and the one thing that I left with too was that he said something I thought was really profound. And I was like, I actually totally agree with you, because we were talking about the resurrection, and he was like, that didn't happen. And I was like, why don't you think it happened? And he said, quote, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. And I was like, I totally agree with that. I mean, I'm with you. To just believe something because it was claimed is in and of itself really unwise. But yeah, anything that's being extraordinarily stated should be backed by extraordinary evidence. And I think with him, where that falls short is, I think there's ideas and persuasions that he has that he wants to live that aren't aligned with the Judeo-Christian God. So in my mind, he will refuse to actually look at the evidence because he's already made up his mind about how he wants to live.
And I feel like I struggle with that. I can't speak for you guys, but there's parts of God's way of living that I don't want to live. Because I want things my own way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, when I took that from the convo, and I took a selfie with him afterwards. It was really fun. He's like, do you want it just me? I'm like, no, I want to be in it, obviously. And, you know, he's a really nice guy, and I think he wrote you back just saying, you know, he enjoyed it. And
you were a nice gentleman, and he was glad to meet you.
I've never been called a nice gentleman.
That's pretty awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so, I mean, again, I really liked him, and I walked away being like, hey, I'll hit you up again. We should get back together. And he said, yeah, just give me a time. So I mean, maybe I will.
I think you should be front row in one of his classes in the fall.
Yeah.
We should
See
all
if he
go. We should go
recognizes
visit.
you.
Yeah. That's
Just
a good idea.
smiling with the
actually.
notebook.
I think what's amazing is that part of what the abundant life is grabbing onto what's true. Like, can you live the abundant life without engaging with what is actually true? And Jesus is the truth. And so you can actually engage someone like Professor Nagy, who is tuck tail and run at 100 miles an hour in the other direction and trying to drag other people in that direction as well. But because the truth is with us and in Christ, you can actually engage people like that in a loving way. And in a way that at the end of it, there's a selfie taken and you get a compliment about you because of your character. There's something about the way that you interacted with him that was different, right? And it wouldn't surprise me if it turned into more conversations later where some of the things that were challenging to him just keep him up at night again.
Yeah.
And because that's what the truth does. It keeps you up at night because it doesn't yield right to your opinion. Your opinion can be this way, but if your opinion doesn't align with what's true, you're gonna struggle.
You know, last week you mentioned, Pez, that sharing Jesus with others is only worth it if he actually holds the information that's crucial to human flourishing. And I've thought a lot about that statement since, and I think that's true. We don't worship and serve a God who is just about himself. Like we actually engage with a God who cares about our well-being and our flourishing. And we can go through the things we go through in life. Like if it's a relationship problem, you can use God's way of living in that problem. And obviously we all struggle, right? So we all play a part in our relationship issues. But just this last week, I was trying to remember, okay, how does God do relationship? And that actually the way he does things actually leads to flourishing. The way I try to do things, it doesn't lead to any sort of flourishing. And I think that for me has given me confidence to talk to people like Nagy, people who are different than me, and be like, actually, this works. And there's also a supernatural element to it of the resurrection, which is like I've seen miracles happen because God is he's not doesn't live in our realm, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't live within our power. He's got his own way of doing things. He's above death. He's above human strength and destruction.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway for like any like listener right now would be there's plenty, there's ample, there's too many people to talk to, right? And I use the practice that we've talked about before on the podcast, which is just listen, connect, and help, as just a quick like boom, 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 which is kind of like just free flowing for myself because it's just easy. I want to listen, I want to connect. Sometimes I want to help, but I definitely want to do the first two, and then I'll have to think about, well, how do I help them and not make it about me? But with anybody, even Nagy, someone who hates Christians, it was just really easy to listen because it was interesting what he was saying. I mean, quote unquote, he's a free thinker. I mean, do I think anyone's actually a free thinker? No, we've all been shaped by our experiences, people in our lives, different things that have happened. So no one's fully free in the way they think. But he did have his own like thoughts that he's actually put a lot of thought into. And it was easy to connect on some of the like complaints he had against Christians and religion and all that. I mean, sometimes I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. That I don't disagree. But I think where it was like, man, where can I help him in this conversation? I think on that one particular, instead of just letting him steamroll the conversation with things I didn't feel were exactly true, was to kind of step up and be like, well, I don't know if that's true because of this. But just to be like, you know what, I actually have a different idea of that than you, and this is why. And I think he respected that. I think he respected that. And so I think you just take that with anybody.
Yeah.
At any time.
John Foreman has this song, what's it called? Put Your God Badge Down. I think everyone should listen to that song. We'll put it in the show notes, put a link to it in the show notes. But he says, I forget what he says. It's not us versus them.
There is no us or them.
There is no us or them.
There's only folks you do or don't understand.
Yeah. That's a powerful line. It's
Yeah.
true.
It just makes someone like Negi human. Because at the end of the day, the thing is, he's a powerful person in a lot of people's lives, and that creates intimidation. In some ways, when you're a free thinker, you really like that. And sometimes when you're a Christian and you're a pastor, you actually really like that too, but you don't want to admit it. So at least Negi's being honest.
Yeah.
A lot of pastors aren't honest about it.
I'm not trying to figure out what he actually thinks or like taking off his own mask. It's like, oh, here it is, plain and simple, 1,000 miles per hour.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay.
And a lot of people in our lives, what that I've noticed, are maybe they're not trying to be right. They're just scared, and they're hurting, and so sometimes that can look like they go on the attack because it's a body reaction, it's a brain reaction, and that's helped me kind of process through some of the hurtful things people have said and done. And not saying you should just submit yourself to those kinds of relationships, but even in my family, it's good to recognize that, man, people are just scared. And I get scared sometimes in relationship, and I don't know how to always act like Jesus in every situation. And it helps you see on a human level, okay, yes, I have Jesus, and this person doesn't follow Jesus like I do, but that doesn't make me any better than them. It actually should give me compassion for them.
Well, so the thing about free thinking that he's talking about, which is a very common word, especially in academia and in universities, is like free thinking. What are we being freed from? And there is where you find the suffering. So when Micah was talking about entering into the suffering of others, what you can do is with someone like that is ask, what's the story behind why you want to be a free thinker? And what does that mean to you? Because it's freedom from what? And freedom usually means that there's some sort of bondage that they're being set free from, some kind of pain, something behind that caused them to want to be free from it.
Yeah.
You know, versus what we've talked about in here is just what the kingdom of God is, which is like life as it should be. Does anybody want to actually be free from life as it should be? Like,
I want that.
there's life as it should be. Do I want to be free from that? And most people are like, no, that's actually what I want. And so the funny thing is the commonality is like Negi is searching for life as it should be. And he is trying hard to get people to live in life as it should be.
Yeah.
Right?
Which actually perfectly aligns with me.
Exactly.
And us,
And that's where the
Christians.
commonality
Right.
is.
Yeah.
Right? So I want people to be free too. I heard somebody say one time, though, that when you talk about being free or being open-minded, the point of an open mind is to close on something. Like, you don't want to just stay open. You actually want it to close on the thing that's real, that's true, that's actually valuable and helpful. And so that's where listen, connect, and help is. But a lot of times what we try to do is force the help on someone before we've sat in their suffering.
Yeah.
And just become someone that they can trust and actually see life as it should be in me.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
That takes time.
yeah, it takes time.
So part of what we've wanted to do with this podcast is talk to people who are living life as it should be. And we're all not, no one's perfect at it, but people who are intentionally living out the abundant life in different ways. And so next week we're actually talking with Jamie Ivey, who in a lot of ways is living life as it should be.
She is the queen of podcasting.
Yeah.
Essentially.
She has like her own bed and breakfast. It's like she has her own glamping ranch, and they're pastors, and she has a podcast called The Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey. And we got to spend some time with her, and it was a good time. We didn't know much about her before we met her, but the moment she walked in the room, I felt like we were fast friends. And
Yeah,
It was awesome.
It was a Texas good time. Like Texas people have big personalities, and
Yeah.
just
Big
fun.
feather earrings.
Yeah, you know, they go for it. Was she
Yeah.
wearing boots? I don't know, probably. But yeah, it was great, and more so than her personality being really fun is that she actually was saying some really profound things. Like, I think of anyone we've interviewed all season, it was the most free flowing, not like, hey, we're going on. It's just like conversational, like you would just talk to your best friend after you haven't seen him in like 6 months.
But she just kept dropping good news into the conversation, like from her own experiences.
yeah.
Yeah.
So check us out next week. We got Jamie Ivey. That's a big deal, and she's a big deal. Her husband Aaron Ivey is super cool too. He makes good music, and yeah, rate us, review us. You've been doing a great job. We got 14,000 ratings last time we said this, so we're going to keep saying it. Just keep us going.
I wish.
I mean, 2. I'm sorry. I got that confused. We got 2, but let's get 2 more. Let's do that. If you like the podcast. So if you like what we're talking about, if you want to hear more, this helps us to keep us going. And
you can follow us on Instagram at Let's Live Alive, and same on Twitter. And we post stuff there throughout the week. We post clips. If you haven't seen this, you can actually go to YouTube, and we have a YouTube channel where we post all these episodes. Well, until next time.
Yeehaw, giddy up, Jamie Ogden.